What is up, everyone? CW Hall here, your host here on the new Kinetic Innovators podcast. And I'm excited to be here with Scott Becker as our inaugural guest today, somebody that most of the people that follow me and my LinkedIn page, coming from healthcare, probably familiar with Scott Becker, founder of the Becker's Hospital Review and all of its media channels, longtime healthcare attorney, over 30 years, and obviously a bit of a serial entrepreneur, having started several businesses. And one of the things we're going to be talking about today is his evolution from being a healthcare attorney to that entrepreneurial person, and now somebody who's sharing his wisdom with those who want to follow in his footsteps as entrepreneurs with his new book, Building Great Businesses. So Scott, thanks for making some time today to join us on the show.
Oh, CW, a total pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and it's great to get to visit with you. Thank you very, very much.
Well, let's rewind a little bit and just give people an idea of kind of how this transpired. Obviously, back in the day, you were a young attorney, seeing your options, thinking I might have to do things a little bit differently here to build my own thing, and then hatched an idea that turned into what became Becker's Hospital Review. Talk about that evolution, then we can start talking about how that came about to where you are now, where you're sharing what you've learned along the way of starting that big project.
Sure. No, thank you so much. So I am, and you said it sort of very much so, I'm very much an incremental evolutionary learner. And so when I first started what became Becker's Healthcare, I was not starting Becker's Healthcare. I was a young attorney trying to build a practice. And in law firms, you come in, you could be different kinds of people in a law firm. You could be a rainmaker, which is someone who brings in business. You could be someone who services clients. You could be both. Obviously, for a long period of time, you're doing both. You're both bringing in business and you're servicing clients. And at the end of the day, I was trying to build a practice to bring in clients, to be a connector within the healthcare space, the healthcare area. And going back 30 plus years ago, started a very rudimentary newsletter, a very, very small conference that was really intended to what you would call today, make myself into a thought leader in healthcare. And I was really just getting going. I was in my late 20s. It goes back a long time ago now. And that thought leadership effort ended up having great success with it in terms of putting myself in the middle as sort of a connector within healthcare, business, legal observer in healthcare. And at some point, 8 to 10 years into that effort of doing this very small newsletter, this very small conference, it became clear that itself was an opportunity, because people were really, it was really when the internet was really just getting going, which seems so far away now when we're talking about artificial intelligence and everything else. And at the time, we had a print magazine, we had a conference, we had a small newsletter, website, but it was really early on in digital newsletters, digital everything. And we really had to, by necessity, when I really turned this into a media business versus just something as a thought leadership effort, we couldn't compete with those that were in the hardcore magazine business. So we really doubled down on trying to become the leader in delivering information about healthcare digitally through the internet and so forth. And this was before that was a thing. And there's pluses and minuses to that. It was just people were just getting going and getting their information online. So there wasn't the competition there is today, but we couldn't compete on paper and print because the magazine we were competing with was sending out 60,000 issues a week, and we just couldn't do it. We'd be broke in a couple of weeks. I mean, that's just reality. We would have been broke. So we ended up taking the other line to try and be a leader in the digital landscape in healthcare. And that's really how we evolved Becker's Healthcare to be digital and events. And now we cover the primary area, hospitals and health systems. We started 30 years ago in surgery centers. We're also in a whole bunch of areas today, pharmacy, oncology, payers, a whole variety of areas in healthcare. And at the end of the day, we talk about this a lot in the book we'll talk about today, everything is about building teams. You can't do anything. I hear all this discussion about solopreneurs, and as far as I can tell, I've never been able to do anything successfully as a solopreneur. Everything's about building great teams and thrive teams with you, and then you could really build something serious. And we've had great luck in doing that in the law firm and in quite frankly, at Becker's Healthcare. And then we've been involved in several other businesses. as an investor directly or indirectly through private equity or venture capital funds and separately. Some of those have gone great. Some of those have gone very poorly. And we've learned a lot from both the wins and the losses, and we share a lot of it in the latest book we have coming out. But CW, thank you so much for having me. That's some of the background. And of course, once I've had enough caffeine, I could talk forever, but I'll stop for a second and let you ask a question and interject back in. So thank you.
Well, no, the thing I'm interested in is, you've been having your media platform grow, and in your case, it wasn't a side hustle. It kind of was, but it was a side hustle that was innovating to build your own practice. It was sort of like a side business that was added to just be another thing that kind of funneled work your way. I think that's an interesting concept. I'm curious, how often people out there kind of spring into their next entrepreneurial effort by doing something kind of seems tangential, but really, builds on what they're already doing.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. I think so much of entrepreneurialism is doing your job and then being able to connect dots. So when I talk to people that want to start a business, and you get so many people that come out of high school, college, et cetera, that want to start a business, and I've always been a believer that it's far easier to start a business when you're in business because you have a much better understanding of the landscape of what problems people are trying to solve or what they're trying to do. And I think the contrast is people that want to start a business, this concept of abstractly whiteboarding business ideas, I think is very, very hard, is a very, very hard thing to do. I think it's very, very hard. I think the more engaged deeply you are in things, and one of the talents I see some people have, and you and I see people like this, that are very good at connecting dots. So they're very engaged in something, and they could sort of see, oh, here's an opportunity here, here's an opportunity here. I was a little bit slow to the game, quite frankly. I was at this with what became Becker's Healthcare, and and it's not, I don't know if I'd say slow to the game, but I was very, very busy building my legal practice, building our team at the law firm, doing what we do, while working on this effort to sort of become a thought leader in healthcare and use that, as you said, to really generate business, to sort of, synergistically. And then it became so clear to me at some point, I had to start pursuing seriously the media business because it was going well without really trying that hard. I mean, there was a real interest in what we were doing. And so I started hiring people full-time into that business. And that goes back 20 plus years ago. And I hired 8 to 10 people in that business right away. And that was a big lift because I was practicing law full-time, hired a bunch of people. And then it becomes one of the key things in business, and we talk about this a lot, is what we call sorting out teams. And then sort those 10 people out that I had hired. I hired them from all, not really any systematic, thoughtful way. I'd hired different people from different places that I knew or that I hired off of ads and other kinds of things. And within a couple of years, it became clear that one of the people that I hired was just fantastic. And she was a relatively young person at that point. And I really put her in charge of everything. And it was really a lot of effort to sort out teams. When she became in charge of everybody, she was in her mid-20s. Everybody else was largely a lot older. Half the people couldn't believe us putting her in charge, but she was working with me for a couple of years already, worked with me out of college, and was running laps around everybody. And at some point, I just had to trust that she was going to be the person in charge. I couldn't do it. I was running my law practice. I was running that business. I was growing that. And she really became in charge of everything commercial with Becker's Healthcare, and still with me today. And as the CEO and president, has just done an incredible job. And years ago was named like the E&Y Transformational Executive of the Year. But one of the lessons I get from all this stuff is you're constantly looking to, we use the phrase double down, pivot, or abandon whatever you're doing. And I talk about that in the context of business. So if you've got great people, you got to find a way to get in front of that and keep them excited about what you're doing, keep them with you, develop what we call a thrive culture where they thrive, you thrive. It's not you thrive, they don't thrive, it's thrive, both thrive and grow. And the same thing with business lines. When things are going well, you double and triple down on them. And it's people, business, it's the same concept. You have great people, you want to make sure that they're really engaged with you fully. You have great business lines. great customers, you double down on those, and you don't spread your efforts all over the place. You put your efforts into those that are really producing, the revenues, the business, the profits, the energy that works. And we talk a lot about that concept of, constantly coming back and focusing on. It goes back to the old Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, that 80% of your results are probably going to come from 20% of your customers. 80% of your results are probably going to come from 20-25% of your people. And it's your job as a leader, a founder, a CEO, whatever you're doing, your job in running a small team is really sorting out the best opportunities, the best people, and doing everything you can to keep on stacking resources and energy around those people and opportunities around those people. The other thing we found is, if you don't engage your best people fully, they will slowly glide away. They'll find other things to do. Maybe not so slowly. They'll find other places to put their energy. So it's imperative upon you as a leader to make sure you're getting opportunities to your best people. And it's not an age or race thing. It's when they're ready, you have to be ready, because if they're really high energy people, they'll find other places to put their energies if you don't find ways to engage with them fully and give them opportunities.
Well, that's I think probably a good segue to talk about Building Great Businesses, your new book. You talked about putting teams together and giving budding young leaders the opportunity to step into growing roles and greater responsibility. The reading the foreword by Jessica Cole on your book, illuminates that very nicely in terms of her response to being given such an opportunity, and your approach to developing young leaders like that and into very important roles.
Well, when we think it's everything, I'll make one quick plug for the book. And I don't know if people are listening yet, but if you want to pre-order the book, it's available at Amazon. It's called Building Great Businesses, Create Momentum, Overcome Setbacks, and Scale with Confidence. And the deal that I'll give you my text number. If you text me at 773-766-5322, we'll send you a $25 Amazon gift certificate to use to buy the book. So it will cost you nothing. In fact, I think the book retails for $21.49 or $22. You'll make $3, which is not here nor there, but would love people to buy the book, and we'd be thrilled to send you an Amazon gift card to cover the cost of it. The book is like a lot of things I do. It's in some ways a third iteration of a book. I'd written several books a long time ago that were healthcare, business, and law space. More recently, I'd written a business book originally to put most of my thoughts and ideas in one place, because I come back to the same thoughts and ideas all the time, and wanted them in an easy reference place for myself, for people that I work with, for my kids, for others. And of course, the first version of the book that I did was a few years back, was not very good. I pulled it because I didn't like how it came out. I just wasn't really pleased with the efforts. Then went back to the drawing board a couple different times. Finally, last summer, got some professional advice on it, rewrote it entirely last summer, and that's the book that's coming out this June. And again, if the first book was a C-, the second book might have been a B. This book, we hope, is an A-, B+, and easy to read. Our goal is always to teach, to entertain, and really, at the end of the day, I can't teach people that much. I can categorize my thoughts, which are going to resonate with some people, not resonate with others, but hopefully people come away with it as an easy read, a little bit more motivated, ready to go on whatever business or career they're doing. It's really intended to provide a little inspiration, a little motivation. I can learn a lot from others. Some people can learn some stuff from me, but it's not the Bible of business, but we hope it's helpful. That's really the gist we see of it, CW.
Well, we've got the number scrolling on the bottom of our screen right now. And then over my shoulder here is a QR code. You can scan that and go to learn more about Scott's book. I've had the opportunity to dig into it a little bit, an early version of the book for typesetting, and be able to read a little bit about it. And, it reads just like talking to you. You're obviously a upbeat, passionate speaker about what you're talking about. And that certainly comes through with the book.
Well, no, thank you. We enjoy it tremendously. To me, it's a gift to get a chance. It's a fascinating effort. And trying to build a book or market a book, the amazing thing is the people I've had a chance to interact with over the last couple of months. And I enjoy it tremendously. It's fascinating. I'm asking people to do me a favor and buy the book. So basically, I say thank you to anybody who does so. And then I end up on a million calls and discussions. And it's really been interesting. I mean, it really is. It wasn't for that purpose in the least bit. And sometimes it can be overwhelming, but it is really a great privilege. And I get to connect with so many people that I've known a little bit over the years. And it's a great project. I kind of recommend it to anybody. It's fascinating, how the things you learn when you're doing something, and so it's been great fun.
Well, talk about, we can give them a couple of nuggets of what they might find out about here in the book. One of the things that you start with is some key elements of the mindset, things you really need to kind of have in mind when you're going to go ahead and dip your toe into an entrepreneurial effort. You want to share just a couple of those thoughts?
Sure. Well, we think about a couple different things. And we always talk about building around niches, great teams, and great product market fit. So that's not unique at all, but we're a big fan of niches, understanding who you're really selling into, why you're selling into them, what they need. I've built plenty of businesses as what I'd call almost advanced hobbies, where I had it clearly defined the niche. And I've never had great success when I'm not clearly defining the niche. So clearly defining the niche. The second thing we talk about always is everything's about building teams and people. I've served on boards where there's one super alpha. I've served on boards where there's 5 great leaders. In the long run, businesses have had several great leaders, not just one great leader. It's very hard at the end of the day to be a top-down leader in the long run. You need thrive people, great cultures, and you need lots of great leaders. We talk often about something we call the evolution of the founder. When you first build a business, it's like the old adage, you're the cook, you're the bottle washer, you sort of do a little bit of everything. The second evolution, we talk about this in 3 stages, the evolution of the founder. The second stage of the evolution of a founder is you've hired people that extend and leverage the founder. They're not necessarily better than the founder, but they extend and leverage the founder. And that's what I would say can allow you to get to 2x growth. But the real growth of a company happens when we talk about the third stage of being a founder, is when you've hired people and those people do all the things you used to do better than you do them. And at that point, a business that is well positioned, where you've sorted out the people right, you've got a good niche, can really grow, because now everything's not dependent upon the energy or drive of the founder. Now you've got lots of self-starters that are growing in a whole different direction and a whole different strength, sort of sprawling, focused growth. And I think it's that third evolution, which is where you want to get to as a founder. The other thing we say about founders is, or CEOs, that there's 3 ways that you judge a CEO. You judge a CEO by how well the business does when they're there. And you can't avoid that. A business has to have results, whether you're a business, a not-for-profit, whatever you're doing. You've got to have serious results. The second thing we talk about is how many other leaders that leader developed. Because at the end, the companies that are built around one supernova person, one super alpha person, they inevitably burn out at some point when that person burns out. But real businesses end up having lots of leaders, lots of teams. And it comes back to something we talked about earlier. When you have great people, you have to find things for them to really lead, really drive, so they feel empowered and engaged and busy. If not, they find other places to put their energy. So secondly, we judge leadership, CEOs, founders, is first, how the business does when they're there. Second, how many other leaders do they develop. The third way that we judge founders is we judge founders based on how well does the business do when they're gone. So a great business that, and really the great testament to people like Steve Jobs, to people like Bill Gates, is not, yes, they built amazing things, but the real testament to them is that Apple is almost a $4 trillion cap company now, years after Steve Jobs' death. Microsoft, yes, it's having a tough year, but it's done tremendously well since Bill Gates left the building. In a lot of ways, you judge leadership based on those 3 things: results while they're there, how many other leaders they develop, and how well does the company do after they're gone. Have they built that good a team, that good a platform, that good at whatever they're doing, that the company continues to thrive when they're gone. So we talk a lot about that. I mean, there are so many subjects we touch on, but those are some of them. Teams and niches. We talk a lot about the evolution of the founder. We talk about the 5 stages of business. We talk about a lot, and we try and weave in our own story of what we did, what worked, what didn't work. And again, like many entrepreneurs, we've had plenty of good successes and plenty of things that have gone poorly. I've been smart enough. The things that have gone poorly haven't killed me, but you almost can't be in this long enough. And one of the beauties of writing the book again is revisiting the discipline it takes to be successful. So one of the things you see with serial entrepreneurs is so many people have one great success, and they almost forget the energy and drive it took to have that success. Like the knowledge is translatable, but what really drives it is knowledge plus energy, knowledge plus that obsession. And so I see so many founders, so many entrepreneurs that really struggle in their second, third, fourth iteration, because at the end of the day, you could be as smart as you are, but with ChatGPT, and even before ChatGPT, like there's always an old phrase that ideas are like whatever you want to call them, everybody has one. Ideas are almost nothing. Execution and drive becomes almost everything. And so many entrepreneurs fail in their second, third, fourth venture because they can't get back. They got to be a beginner again. Even though you have the knowledge of what it takes to be great, the energy and drive you need as well. And that's hard to manufacture. I mean, that's, that many of us find there's periods of time in our lives where we're totally driven, totally motivated. Other periods of our life where there's valleys. And it's, when things grab you, you have to go after them because that energy doesn't always come. And I find it a fascinating thing about business and life.
I'm sure that as you're evolving, you're in that first part of your business building, and you're kind of the engine, you're everything. You're the person, the head bottle washer or the CEO, everything. I'm sure it's a bit of a challenge for many of the entrepreneurs out there who do have something successful started to actually then start to delegate, start to let somebody else make decisions and choices that affect the business and, keep it going.
Yeah, no. And to that point, I've worked with 2 types of leaders. One type of leader is, and I've seen success with both types of leaders. One type of leaders hires the brightest people they can hire, the best people they can hire, and tries to largely give them a little direction and stay out of the way. Another type of leader hires pretty good people, but then manages them extremely closely. And I've seen people have success with both of those ways of doing business. To me, I've always been a fan of the hire brilliant people and give them lots of freedom and thrive side by side. But I've also had great leaders that I would call closer to micromanagers that have built great things that I respect tremendously. It's hard for me to operate that way because I'm not very good at it. I want to have really bright people. I don't want to look at every single detail every single day. But I used to have a real bias against the second type of leader that micromanages, but I found so many great leaders that manage that way and do it really well. And in some ways, they bring the best out of people that might otherwise not get to where they're going. And so I don't have, I guess the one important thing as a leader is that you understand how you operate best, whether it's being so hands-on with everybody that you're almost micromanaging. That's a bad connotation, but it shouldn't. Or you're a leader who just hires great people and ultimately gets out of the way and could evolve to that level 3 type founder where you're really thriving despite yourself or aside from yourself. But I've seen both be really successful. So I used to have a really strong bias towards one type of leadership, which is more how I'm wired. But I've seen so many people be so good for so long in the other type of leadership too, where they don't necessarily hire the best and brightest, but they carefully manage everything. To me, it's exhausting, but I've seen people do it really, really well. So I never want to really knock it. I think it's incredible to be able to do that and do it well.
One of the things you talked about in the book is how ideas come to you while you're actually in the trenches doing the work. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think that's right. Whenever a young person comes to me and says they want to be an entrepreneur, I always tell them, get a job first and then be an entrepreneur. And I say that somewhat tongue in cheek, but I say it quite seriously. And the reason for that is I think it's very hard to abstractly whiteboard ideas for business. I think it's very hard to just sit and come up with ideas. Most of us need to be engaged in something, then you connect dots. It's almost like if you're working on a sport to become better at a sport, you could take as many lessons as you want, but you got to play some too. You got to integrate both. How do you compete versus what are you learning? And I think in business, it's much easier to engage, to be thoughtful, and come up with ideas for what works by actually testing things, by being in the market, by being engaged in things, and seeing what people need and what they do. I think it's one of the travesties of internet world, or not face-to-face world, is it doesn't engage people in the same way. It does and it doesn't. But I think it's very healthy to actually be involved in business, talking to people, understanding what's going on, seeing things. Like when you're at a business that's making money and you start to understand, hey, here's how this business makes money. In some ways, that's an aha moment, because once you understand that, you figure out, okay, maybe I could do this in a different way or a different business, in a million different businesses. I just think it's much easier to be successful from a position of working and seeing things versus abstractly trying to come up with ideas. And again, you've had this glorification of the garage entrepreneur, going back to my generation, the Steve Jobs, Bill Gates generation of, they never worked, they dropped out of college, but they were uniquely, that's like saying LeBron James doesn't have to go to college. Well, he's uniquely talented, not as talented as Michael Jordan, but very talented. I say that jokingly for every fan.
I understand.
But most of us are not Michael Jordan. We're not LeBron. We're not Steve Jobs. We're not Bill Gates. We better work and figure out business, a little bit of both. And then at some point you can make a choice that you're going to be full into your business. Of course, that's a natural choice. But I hear people on Twitter, other places saying to young professionals, you have to burn the boats. You have to go all in. And again, that is often language from people that were very privileged and don't have to worry about it, or people that have never been successful at all. We sometimes joke, oh my goodness, and this is so rude, that the most critical people are often the least accomplished. And again, and that's not always the case, but there's a lot to be said for being in the trenches and learning while being in the trenches, connecting dots, trying to see things. I find it very hard to abstract great ideas without actually being engaged in things.
Talk a little bit about getting started, because obviously you got to have passion, you got to have the ability to build a team, but talk about the focus that you need to place on who you're starting your business with. Large clients, some people want to try to go and get the whale first so that they can really come out strong, but in the book you talk about maybe that's not necessarily the best thing to go for straight out of the gate.
Yeah, I think most of us, there are people that start businesses around huge mega clients, not even a question. I would say that 95% of businesses start around small and mid-sized clients, and there's a lot to be said for that. The sales cycle is a lot shorter. It's a lot easier to pick up business. But it's this concept of starting with small and mid-sized clients, and also looking at being able to connect dots to, we're going to spend 80% of our time really taking care of those clients. We're looking at how do we grow in such a way and how we deliver what we do for people, how that we could also, as time goes on, handle larger clients as well. And I think it's very hard to start businesses with large clients for a lot of reasons. One, you often don't have the capacity to take care of those clients well, where it's much easier to take care of smaller clients well when you're figuring out and growing your business. Second is it often, the big clients have very long sales cycles traditionally. So unless you're funded with a huge amount of money and huge connectivity, it's very hard to start with large clients. I've seen companies funded out of major payers where they start with a large client. They start with a large customer. That's sort of a different business than most of us are in. And like Peter Thiel, who started Palantir, built such an incredible machine and business that they sort of started with governmental clients. Most of us can't do that. Most of it's very hard. When I see people with this Rural Healthcare Transformation Act, you've got all these people chasing those dollars going to different places. But largely, if you didn't have already the relationships in place, it's going to be hard to pick up big dollars from those things. It's very hard to do so. So we're ultimately we're a big fan. At least most things I've been really involved in. Started with small, mid-sized clients. Then at some point you grow into larger clients. Larger clients, at the end of the day, every business over a period of time, unless you're a consumer business, needs larger clients. You just might not start there. And often business, you'd like to be able to skip steps, but it's often very hard to. So most of us start with small, mid-sized clients, try and figure out our flywheel, try and figure out our business, and then really grow into larger clients. The other thing we always talk about in business, and I used to lecture about this often, is this concept that you have to dig 10 ditches before they dig themselves. And so, what I mean by that is you often have to work very hard till you start getting a customer or two. Then you have to keep on working hard till those customers are really pleased. Then you have to keep on working hard until they start to generate other customers, referrals, and other business. And it takes a while of real hard work, real hard execution with customers until it gets a little bit easier to develop more customers. And I think it's, we see so many people start businesses not realizing it's probably going to take a couple of years to really get something going in the right direction. And it's going to take a gargantuan amount of effort up front to move it in the right direction. And so we talk about that often. We use the phrase digging 10 ditches until they start to dig themselves. There's a person who recently wrote a book that I've read or partially through reading called Unhinged Habits. I think it's called, or Unhinged something. And I think the book is quite good about this concept of, look, when you're getting anything started, it's not balancing everything. It's giving all into whatever you're starting. So if I'm trying to work on my fitness and I sort of dawdle through the year with a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit of diet and exercise here, a little bit of exercise there, I'm probably not going to get there. But if I put in a couple early months in the year, I really got to get my weight where I want it to be. I really got to get my fitness where I want it to be. I'm much more likely to be able to hold on to it for the rest of the year. And I think there's a lot of truth there in a lot of things. When you're getting something started, I'm not saying quit your day job, but I am saying as you get something started, it's going to take a lot of energy. Like if I didn't make the effort early on in a couple of my businesses to sort out the people early, I sort out the people early, we get the right leadership in charge early, and that could serve you well for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. If you don't sort those people out early and make that real effort to do so, or figure out who your ideal customer is early, you could spend years spinning your wheels. And we've done both. I mean, we've had great success in business, and we spun our wheels in other business where we didn't really make the effort to really identify, this is our ideal customer. This is our ideal salesperson. This is our ideal what we're trying to execute on for customers.
So if I have a great idea, a great product, great service, I have some clients, that fit the mold of what we're talking about here, small, mid-sized clients that are interested in what we're doing. I think the last question I'll leave you with is, at what point do I consider taking funds from outside sources, or should I? How do you make up that kind of decision?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. And a lot of it depends on what you're trying to build. So when I talk to founders, I talked to a founder yesterday building a software AI type business, and they've already got, I think, $160 million worth of funding. So from a set of high-end venture capital funds. Now, the type of business that he is building, that they're building, you could never self-fund. I mean, most people couldn't. I mean, there might be some, but unless you're like you started on home base, you're not self-funding a $150 million business that requires that kind of. There's certain business you're going to need outside funding. There's almost no way around it, and you're a race to market. You just can't fund it yourself and be able to get to where you have to get to in the time frame that's needed. Well, that market is there, opportunity is there. So some businesses you're going to have to take outside funding. For my businesses, my most successful businesses, we largely did not take outside funding in for a very long time. We were able to self-fund them, and I was making a living doing something else that I was using to fund this. That's always scary. So instead of putting money away, you're putting it into the new business. But it not too long into the business, we ended up being at least cash flow positive. And for all the discussion about all those things out there, cash flow positive is where you have to get to as soon as you can. And the reason it's so important, and it's hard, because once you're cash flow positive, then you can make the decision, are we investing in this? Are we growing this? Are we hiring another person here? Are we going into this line? What are we doing? Until you're cash flow positive, you're playing with your own money. And this is a scary thing to do in business. But at the end of the day, for many entrepreneurs, the longer that you can hold on without bringing in outside capital, the better. You have more control. You have a better opportunity to ultimately do well with it and so forth. But there's a downside. If it goes poorly, it's your money. And there are some investors that can be value added, can actually be useful to your business growth. But at the end of the day, I think if you need the money because you're building a business at scale that just needs money, there's no way around it. You know, we talk about businesses in 5 stages: the idea, actual product or service, actual revenue, then profits, then scale. And in some businesses, scale and profits might be reversed by design, but 5 phases of building a business. And at the end of the day, I'm a huge fan. The further you get along that chain, the easier to raise capital on terms that are going to be good for you and to maintain equity and not give away the whole store. Like I had met somebody recently, sold the business literally for $4.9 billion, which is a crazy amount of money. They did get wealthy themselves, but certainly nowhere near the wealth you would expect for somebody who sold the business for $5 billion. You know, it different ways about going about it in different types of businesses. If you're in biotech, you're in technology, or in other areas, you're probably going to have to take outside capital. You know, if you're doing a business that can cash flow earlier and without taking an outside capital, God bless you, gives you so much more flexibility over the long run.
Well, I'll put the number back on the scroll again. So you can text a screenshot of your receipt from Amazon where you can pre-order Building Great Businesses. It's running across the bottom of the screen here. You can also go to the QR code over my shoulder here and get information about the book, get it pre-ordered on Amazon. It'll come to you in June. Scott Becker, I really appreciate you making time for us today on our inaugural episode of the Kinetic Innovators podcast. And I'm excited to get it started. And it was great to have you join us on the program today. Any final thoughts before we let you go here?
No, that was so fun. I thank you so much, CW, for having me. And again, to the audience, text 773-766-5322. We'll send you the $25 Amazon gift card to cover the book. We really appreciate it. But more so, CW, what a pleasure to visit with you. You're just so gracious and so thankful. Thank you so much.
You know, if you follow Scott, I will say before we let you go, last thing, if you follow Scott on LinkedIn, you might get a DM from them, but that's actually someone sending out messages to their followers to say, hey, do us a favor. So it's not a bot sent email. So you can actually reply to that, and they just want you to help get a little momentum as the book comes to market.
Thank you so much. You know, I see a tab on here where it says stream to your audience. I wonder if the next time I do this, I'm allowed to stream it to my LinkedIn followers too, or how that works. So that'll be a different discussion for a different day. But CW, thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you for making us a part of your day today. Coming up in a couple of weeks, we'll have Gavin Phillips from Egg Medical. Scott Becker, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you as always, CW. Thank you.